If you have type A blood, you are carrying something older than your own species. Not older than your family, not older than your country, older than humanity itself. The single letter on a hospital form, A, is one of the oldest things about you. Older than every language you could name it in. Older than the first face that would have looked human to you at all. And for a very long time, almost everyone who studied it believed the exact opposite. Here is the strange part. That same A, the precise molecular signature sitting on your red blood cells, is not unique to us. It shows up in gibbons. It shows up in old world monkeys. The same two tiny changes that decide A from B in a human being decide A from B in an ape that has never shared a country, a continent, or an epoch with you. In 2012, a team led by Laure Segurel and Przeworski at the University of Chicago published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences with a title that sounds almost dull until you understand it. The ABO blood group, they wrote, is a trans-species polymorphism in primates. Trans-species, across species, meaning the difference between A and B is not something humans invented. We inherited it from ancestors we share with other primates, and it has been carried down unbroken for millions of years, in them and in you. So where did your A really come from? Not the hospital, not your parents, not even the first humans. The honest answer is stranger than any place on a map, and we are going to follow it all the way down. But not yet, because before we can talk about where it came from, we have to clear away almost everything you were ever told about what it is. This channel spends its time on one thing, the history written inside the human body, the record your cells kept when nobody was writing anything down. If that is the kind of story you want more of, you know what to do. Then stay with me, because this one quietly overturns a lot of what people assume about blood. Here is the first thing that is going to mess with your head. For most of the 20th century, people tried to rank blood types by age. There was a whole field for it. Type O was the caveman's blood, they said, the primitive original. Type A came with the first farmers. Type B belonged to the wandering herders of the steppe. Entire diets and personality systems were built on top of that story, and versions of it are still being sold today. Almost none of it survived contact with the actual genetics. The blood types did not arrive in a neat marching order, oldest to youngest, race by race. The A and B forms are ancient, so ancient they predate the human species, which is exactly what the trans-species finding shows. And O, the type people called the original, is in molecular terms a version of the gene that simply stopped working, a switch turned off. Old in its own way, but not the primitive root of some family tree of races. There is no ladder here, there never was. That matters because so much of what you will hear about blood, including the part we are building toward, depends on you believing your type is a badge that sorts you into a group. It is not. It is closer to a living fossil, a form so old it has outlasted the species carrying it, riding quietly in the blood of billions of people who have nothing else in common. Hold on to that image, a living fossil in the blood, because we are going to keep coming back to it. Now, the founder. When two versions of a gene are as old as A and B, you would expect time to have erased one of them. Genes drift. Rare variants vanish. Over millions of years, one usually wins and the others disappear. That is the default. It is what almost always happens. A and B refuse to disappear. The same two changes in the same spot keep turning up across primate species. Not reinvented from scratch each time, but inherited from a common source and held onto. The evidence Segurel's team laid out points to one explanation. This is not coincidence, not convergence. It is a single ancient variation kept alive on purpose by natural selection, for longer than our species has existed. How could anyone possibly know it was inherited, and not just the same accident striking twice? Because of what surrounds the change. When a mutation happens independently in two species, the DNA around it looks different in each. Different neighbors, different history. When a variant is truly handed down from a shared ancestor, it drags a little of that ancestor's surrounding DNA along with it. And that signature is unmistakable. In humans and in other primates, the stretch of code around the A and B site carries exactly that shared inheritance. It was not reinvented over and over. It was passed down. We will never know the deep ancestor in whom these forms first split apart. No name, no face, no place. But we know the variation survived through every ice age, every extinction, every bottleneck that nearly ended the human line. It was already old when the first modern humans walked out of Africa. It is still here. It is in you. That is the spine of this whole story. Not a bloodline, not a tribe. A single, stubborn piece of inheritance older than all of us, carried forward because it was worth carrying. So what is it physically? The instructions for your blood type sit on chromosome 9 in a gene simply called ABO. The gene builds a small enzyme, and the enzyme has one job. It decorates the surface of your red blood cells by adding a sugar. The A version adds one kind of sugar. The B version adds a slightly different one. If you are type AB, you run both. And type O is the version of the gene that adds nothing at all. The enzyme is switched off, and the cell surface is left plain. That is the entire difference. Not better blood, not older blood, not stronger blood. One sugar, or a different sugar, or none, placed by an enzyme whose blueprint is older than humanity. Understanding that sugar is not trivia. It is the reason blood used to kill the people it was meant to save. For centuries, a transfusion was a gamble with death, because no one knew that mixing the wrong types makes the body attack its own new blood. It was Karl Landsteiner who cracked it. He identified the ABO groups in 1901, work that would eventually earn him a Nobel Prize in 1930. Only then did transfusion become something other than a coin toss. The whole modern practice of donor and recipient, universal O and universal AB, rests on that one discovery about a sugar on a cell. And there is a quiet irony folded into it. The very quirk that gets sold as a mark of separateness is, in a hospital, exactly what lets one stranger's blood save another's. The reason a donor in one place can keep a child alive in another. And that same sugar is where the real origin lives. Not in a homeland, in deep time. The reason A and B are still here after millions of years is that carrying different types has, again and again, been an advantage. And not always the same advantage. Different blood types meet different diseases differently. Type O appears to fare worse against the most severe forms of cholera. Some types shift the odds against particular strains of malaria. Others change how the body deals with certain stomach bugs and ulcers. None of this is destiny. These are tendencies measured across whole populations, never a verdict on any one person's life. But stacked over millions of years, they are enough. When no single type is best against everything the world throws at us, evolution does something counterintuitive. It keeps all the options on the table. Biologists call it balancing selection. It is why the fossil never fossilized. The variation stayed alive because staying varied kept us alive. You can still see that contest etched into the map today. In the great river deltas of South Asia, where cholera has haunted human settlements for centuries, type O is strikingly uncommon. And many researchers suspect that is no accident, but the residue of generations in which carrying O was quietly more dangerous. In other regions, it is the long shadow of malaria that seems to have nudged the balance a different way. A disease you will very likely never catch may have reached across hundreds of years to help set the letter on your own blood card. That is how deep and how patient this tug-of-war runs. So the true origin of your A is not a place your ancestors came from. It is a tug-of-war between our ancestors and the microbes that hunted them, so old and so evenly matched that it kept every hand in the game. That is the answer to where did it really come from? Not east, not west, not any lost civilization. Down. Down through deep time, into a contest older than the species. Now watch how that plays out across the world, because the map is where people get fooled. Blood types are not spread evenly. Type A runs high through parts of Central and Northern Europe. Type B climbs as you move across Central and East Asia. Type O dominates the Americas. In many populations before European contact, very nearly everyone was O. Lay that out on the world map, and it is tempting to read it like a fingerprint, as if each type marked out a people. It does not. Those frequencies are the residue of accidents. Which small groups happen to settle where, which epidemics swept through, which founders happened to be carrying which version when a population was young and small. Move a few founding families, add one bad plague, and the map redraws itself. Your type does not tell you which people you are. It tells you a little about the demographic weather your ancestors walked through, and nothing at all about your worth. The Americas are the clearest case of all. When a relatively small group of people first crossed into two empty continents, they carried only a slice of the world's variation with them, and Type O happened to ride that slice. Everyone who came after descended from that founding sample, and so, for thousands of years, O stayed near total from the Arctic to the far south. Not because it was superior, because of who happened to walk through the door first. That is a founder effect, history's accident frozen into a frequency. And it is the very same force on a far larger stage that we are about to watch play out inside a single mountain valley. Which brings us to the other line on your blood label, the one that turned an ordinary letter into a mythology. The plus, or the minus. If your blood is type A negative, that little minus sign has almost certainly been sold to you as something extraordinary. There is a whole world online that treats Rh negative blood as a mystery, a rare lineage, a separate kind of human, sometimes something not of this earth at all. It is one of the most persistent stories ever attached to the human body. So let us do the thing those stories never do. Let us actually look at where the minus comes from. The plus and minus refer to a single antigen, the D antigen, sitting on the surface of your red cells, built by a gene called RHD on chromosome 1, right beside its twin, RHCE. If you make the D antigen, you are Rh positive. If you do not, you are Rh negative. That is all the sign means, a protein present or a protein absent. The name itself gives away how ordinary it is. It is called Rh, rhesus, because it was pinned down in 1940 by Landsteiner, again working with Alexander Wiener on the blood of rhesus monkeys. A year earlier, in 1939, two other researchers, Philip Levine and Rufus Stetson, had traced a mother's mysterious, dangerous reaction back to the very same antigen. Monkeys and a case report. That is the whole exotic origin of the word. And here is the fact that quietly ends the mystery. Rh negative blood does not come from one source. It never did. In people of European descent, the negative almost always traces to the same event. The entire RHD gene has been deleted, snipped cleanly out. Franz Wagner and Willy Flegel worked out exactly how and published it in the journal Blood in 2000. The gene sits sandwiched between two nearly identical stretches of DNA, and those matching stretches let the gene get looped out and lost. But travel to much of sub-Saharan Africa, and the negative usually comes from something completely different. The gene is still there, but broken by an inserted piece of DNA that silences it. Travel to East Asia and you find yet another pattern. Many people typed as Rh negative are still carrying a whole, or nearly whole, RHD gene that simply is not fully switched on. Sit with what that means. The same outcome, no D antigen, reached by a deletion in one place, a broken gene in another, a silence gene in a third. 3 different genetic events in 3 different parts of the world. If Rh negative blood came from one hidden source, one lost people, one secret lineage, one arrival from somewhere else, we would expect to find one signature everywhere, one fingerprint. We do not. We find several, written by different hands in different places at different times. It did not happen once. It happened again and again and again. A rare bloodline does not do that. A common, ordinary quirk of a well-studied gene does that all the time. But there is one place on Earth where the minus really does pile up, and it is the piece of evidence the mystery sellers love most. So it is worth walking straight into it. The Basques. The Basque people live along the Western Pyrenees between Spain and France, and they are genuinely unusual, not in a supernatural way, in a measurable one. They speak Euskara, a language with no known relatives anywhere on Earth, and they carry the highest frequency of Rh-negative blood in the world, around a third of the population, and in a 2018 study in the European Journal of Human Genetics, the classic RhD deletion reached over 47%. To someone selling a mystery, that is irresistible. An isolated people, an unrelated language, and strange blood. It practically writes the legend for you. Here is what the genetics actually says. The Western Pyrenees were one of the refuges where people rode out the last ice age, and the Basques descend, in large part, from those long-settled populations, with less of the later churn that reshaped the rest of Europe. In genetic terms, they were comparatively isolated for a long time. And isolation does something very specific to a gene. Whatever the founders happen to carry, the population tends to keep. A version that is common in a small starting group stays common, generation after generation, simply because there is less mixing to dilute it. That is the whole explanation. Not a separate origin, a preserved one. The Basques are not a different kind of human with different blood. Modern DNA is clear. They carry the same deep hunter-gatherer and early farmer ancestry as their neighbors. What makes them a living archive is not that they came from somewhere else, it is that they stayed put. An isolated valley is an accidental laboratory. It keeps the old proportions intact while everywhere else gets stirred. So the Basque minus is not proof of a hidden bloodline. It is proof of the opposite, of how nothing more than drift and isolation, given enough time, can concentrate a perfectly common variant until it looks like a secret. There is one honest puzzle left in all this, and it is worth being straight about, because it is the kind of loose end the myths rush to fill. Rh-negative blood carries a real cost. When an Rh-negative mother carries an Rh-positive child, her immune system can learn to recognize that D antigen, and in a later pregnancy, turn on the baby's blood. For most of history, that was a quiet killer of newborns, with no name and no defense. So you might ask, if the minus is dangerous, why did evolution not scrub it out? The honest answer is that we are not fully certain. Part of it is simple accident, founder effects and drift, the same forces that piled the minus up among the Basques, spreading it before anyone could select against it. Some researchers have proposed that carrying one copy might have offered a small edge against certain parasites. That idea is a hypothesis, not a settled fact, and good scientists still argue about it. What we can say plainly is that it does not require a mystery. Ordinary population genetics, accident, isolation, and a cost too small and too slow to erase a common variant is enough. And the danger itself is no longer what it was. In the 20th century, medicine learned to give Rh-negative mothers a targeted injection that stops that immune reaction before it starts. A condition that once emptied cradles is now, in much of the world, a routine line on a chart. The minus on your card is there because someone, generations ago, died for want of knowing it, and because someone else, later, made sure fewer people would. That is the real weight of Rh-negative blood, not a legend. A hard-won line of medical safety, written in the losses that came before it. So let us bring this all the way back to you. If you are watching this with type A blood, maybe A negative, what does it actually mean? It means you are carrying a living fossil. The A came to you down an unbroken line older than the human species, kept alive not because it belonged to any one people, but because staying varied kept all of our ancestors alive. And the minus, if you have it, is not the mark of a secret lineage or a separate kind of human. It is a common, ancient quirk of a single gene, one that arose more than once, in more than one place, and simply pooled a little deeper in the valleys where people stayed put the longest. Trace either one back far enough, and something quietly astonishing happens. Follow your family tree back 200 generations, and the same ancestors start appearing thousands of times over. The branches fold back into each other until your lineage and their lineage are the same handful of people. Go back further still, past the first humans, and your blood type stops belonging to you, or to your country, or even to your species. The same deep source turns up in the blood of a stranger on the other side of the planet, and in an ape that has never heard the word human. That is the thing the mystery gets exactly backwards. Your blood type is not a wall between you and everyone else. It is one of the oldest things you share with them. Every person who carries your type is, at the level that actually counts, a distant cousin. And it does not mean you are any particular people. It means you belong to a family far larger and far older than any of the borders drawn on top of it. A living fossil carried in the blood. Older than any nation, older than any language, older than any flag, any border, any line ever drawn between one kind of person and another. Older even than the word human itself. It was already ancient when we were new. It survived everything that tried to end us, and it is still here, still being carried forward in you. If this is the kind of history you want to keep uncovering, the record kept inside the body long before anyone thought to write it down, then stay with us. There is far more of it left to read.